Everyone, my name is Brendan Cahill. I'm the Executive Director of Fordham University's Institute of International Humanitarian Affairs, and I want to welcome you to today's webinar. This is one of the webinars that we've had in the series that began back in September. Today's webinar is Promoting and Protecting Parenting During the Climate Crisis. We have a really remarkable group of panelists on this webinar today, and I thought I would first introduce you to the Institute if you're not aware of us and our work. The Institute of International Humanitarian Affairs prepares current and future aid workers with the knowledge and skills needed to respond effectively in times of humanitarian crisis and disaster. We do this through education. We have undergraduate programs, graduate programs. We have a second master's that's coming out in the fall, as well as professional certification training. And all of that is available to you at IIHAglobal.org or fordham.edu/IIHA. Besides our educational training, we also have various areas of research, and Dr. Jones and Dr. Yigeremu have also been part of that research area of the Institute, as well as exhibitions, publications, podcasts, conferences. We aim to educate on a global level, and so we do that both online as well as in person throughout the world. It's my great pleasure today to introduce the panelists to you, and after that introduction, I will leave it to them for their presentation. I'll then come back to curate the questions and answers, and then say goodbye to you at the end. I will promise you that we will be done within the hour, so that you will not go beyond the next 58 minutes. So, Dr. Lynne Jones. Dr. Lynne Jones has an Order of the British Empire. She's a fellow of the Royal College of Psychiatrists. She's an honorary associate professor at the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine. And as I mentioned before, she's a visiting research fellow at the Institute at Fordham University. She is a renowned child psychiatrist and relief worker with over 30 years of experience establishing mental health services in global conflict zones. From a personal point of view, I've known Lynne for 25 or so years, and she co-founded our mental health and complex emergencies program, which is now online and happens every fall. She consults for major UN agencies as well as NGOs. She's the author of 4 books, including the 2024 release, Sorry for the Inconvenience, but This is an Emergency. And she holds a PhD in social psychology and political science. Welcome, Dr. Jones. Our second panelist is Dr. Asmamaw Yigeremu. He is a medical doctor, Master of Science. He's also a visiting research fellow at Fordham University. He's a general practitioner with over 30 years of experience managing clinical care for rural and indigenous communities in Ethiopia, Haiti, Mozambique, and Belize. He specialized in building emergency and primary healthcare services from the ground up for refugees in conflict-affected populations, and he's volunteered for Doctors of the World UK. For the past 5 years, Asmamaw has partnered with Dr. Jones on maternal and child health interventions across Latin America, Africa, and Europe. He holds his MD from Havana Medical School, an MA from Tufts University, and an MSc from the University of Exeter. Last but not least is Henry Bineah. He's a seasoned project manager specializing in family preservation and child protection in emergencies. Henry has over 20 years of experience in development cooperation. He has successfully managed complex projects in collaboration with more than 50 partners in various sectors in Kenya, benefiting numerous vulnerable groups. Bineah holds a bachelor's degree in social studies and is involved in the National Positive Parenting Technical Advisory Committee, aiding in the implementation of a new national parenting program. He's dedicated to community service, and he also enjoys sports travel and family activities. It's a great pleasure to welcome these three remarkable people to the webinar series, and I turn it over to you, Dr. Jones.
Thank you, Brendan. I'm just going to share my slides, which takes a moment as I get onto the correct view for you guys. I hope now you can all see the slide properly. Yes, great. So it's really lovely to have this opportunity to share our work, and thank you very much, Brendan and the IIHA Fordham and Lily for arranging it. I'm going to talk about our parenting program. Obviously, I can't go into enormous detail, but the three of us are going to address why and how we do it, and then explain how we integrate addressing the climate and nature crises into our work. All three of us are going to present different bits, and we jump around a bit, but we'll make it clear as we go along. So, in the last 5 years, as Brendan said, my husband and I have devised an integrated program with the main aim of protecting and promoting maternal and infant health, particularly for mothers living in adverse circumstances. And we have some principles underlying the program, which we've applied in every setting. First of all, it's based on that nurturing care framework developed by UNICEF and WHO, which is a really great framework, which includes both physical and mental health. Second, really important, it's interactive and it's fun. And it's got to be empowering from the mum, so you've got to feel better after doing it. And we try to deliver the knowledge in a way that is easy for them as mothers to pass the knowledge on to other mothers, and we understand that this does happen. It also, of course, provides the opportunity for training other staff, midwives, community health visitors, whoever basically wants to sit in and learn from us and carry on. It's got to be deliverable in a short period of time because mothers are busy. Some of them we've worked with are on the move. Some of them are living in very tough circumstances. And so it's a short program. And the other thing that may be different from many programs, both mothers and children attend. It's interactive and we need the children there. The method of delivery is adapted according to the context and situation of the mothers. We've been in all sorts of places. Some want a lot in a few days, some want it spread out over 2 weeks. That will be up to them. And yes, of course, we include fathers if we can. But our experience is that fathers are often too busy to come. And that is the thing we're working on, and we'll welcome your advice in the discussion as to how to get them there. So people say, well, why do you, why not just an ordinary parenting child development program, which is what I used to do? Why this emphasis also on physical and mental health? And it's very interesting. In my entire humanitarian career, things have been separated out into boxes. I mean, when I started in Uganda teaching early child development to mothers and babies, the nutrition people were working in one part of the camp, I was working in another, never the twain did meet, although we were talking about each other. When I started working on the Somali border, Asmamaw was literally, as in the picture, in the next door room teaching childhood illnesses and vaccinations. And I was in another room teaching child development and loving responsive care. Mental health wasn't integrated into physical health, and physical health wasn't integrated into mental health. And we think a holistic approach where we discuss both together is much better. For example, let's take breastfeeding. It's really good for nutrition, and you need to explain all that, but it's also really good for fostering love and communication between the mother and child. And we want to talk about both those things at once. Or take maternal depression. Well, one of the things that improves maternal depression is playing with the baby and having a healthy understanding how to keep your child healthy. So we want to integrate there as well. There are many examples. Now, these are the sessions we cover in the course. It used to be 10, and we've gone up to 14. The sessions are divided between a physical health focus and a mental health developmental focus, and we can't go into them all in detail. But I'm going to briefly share what I do, and Asmamaw and I will look at a bit more detail in the sessions in red, because those are the ones that are commonly or not commonly included in parenting interventions. And if I'm wrong about that and people are doing it, again, love to hear about that in the discussion. So the main aim of most of my sessions is to help mothers understand what's child development, how it differs from growth. They often don't get that initially, and how it's promoted by loving, responsive caregiving. And I have a very simple slogan, and the pictures illustrate it all: love, play, communicate. And the pictures are all taken with mother's permission, and I haven't allowed to share them. We want to show mothers during our sessions how their own lovely interactions, the good ones, actually foster each area of development: language and communication, physical development, loving attachment, how these are fostered through loving, responsive communication. Love, play, communicate. Just going to try and show you this tiny example. I hope it works on your screens. The importance of having infants in the room is illustrated by this, because the infants are our teachers. We emphasize good, positive interactions that are going on all the time around the room. So here's a mother and baby playing, and we're going to say, mothers, what's going on here? What areas of development are being enhanced in this little game? And the answer, of course, I can't ask you because you're all on Zoom, is all of them: muscle development, hand-eye coordination, verbal and non-verbal communication, loving attachment, all fostered through this one little game. And when mothers see how important playing with their children is in this loving way, they're really excited about it. It's lovely to do. So, of course, we also have a session on stress, allowing mothers to discuss the stresses they face on a daily basis, and they face many. I've just given you some examples here from the last program we did in the Masai Mara, because this really, we had very young mothers, and as you see, many of these stresses, if you read them, relate directly to gender-based violence. And that's the main reason we brought in a whole session on gender-based violence. And Asmamaw is going to go into more detail that in a moment. But it's perhaps not surprising, given how stressed the mothers are, that all of them, and this is not just in the Masai Mara, but in Kenya and Guatemala, places engage in harsh discipline with their children, like spanking, pinching. And we need to explain, first of all, how this stresses the child, how that can harm the developing brain. And then we spend a whole session on positive discipline. And this is near the end of the training, because if you spent the previous days encouraging loving play, mothers themselves are saying, oh, when I play with my child every day, I feel less stress, the child feels less stress, and their behavior is better. So they can see one of the ways to increase positive behavior and less need for harsh discipline. It all integrates. Now I'm going to hand over to Asmamaw.
Okay. Hello, everybody, and thank you, Brandon and Lily, and Brandon for your encouraging introduction. And I'm very glad to have this opportunity to share our. As Lynn said, many of our partners were initially surprised at our including this topic, but think about this. Healthy mothers have a lower risk of preterm birth, lower birth weight, and the neonatal mortality. Maternal health during pregnancy and the postpartum period sets the trajectory for a child's health in the first 5 years and beyond, reducing the risk of chronic diseases in adulthood. A healthy woman makes a healthy family. Women are typically the primary caregivers, and when healthy, they can provide better care for children and the elderly family members. So we discuss topics which many mothers have never thought about, such as how to check their breasts for cancer, having regular cervical checkups, and the HPV vaccines, and the checking blood sugar and the blood pressures. In addition, climate change disproportionately impacts women's health by exacerbating existing gender inequalities, poverty, and the risk to reproductive health. And the new research is showing that rising heat reduces physical activity, which is contributing to an increase in obesity and the diseases like hypertension and the diabetes, particularly in East Africa and Central America, where we work. Next, please. As Lynne showed in her slides on stress, many of stresses women face relate to gender-based violence, which is why in Kenya, mothers asked us to give dedicated time for this topic. Our participants in Masai Mara told us, in Masai culture, women cannot own anything. So they were economically powerless. Polygamy and early forced marriage were cultural norms affecting almost all of women in our training, and at least half of them were beaten on a daily basis. So having a discussion on how to address it, which included male community health workers, was very important and resulted in everyone calling for advocacy and change. Perhaps the most unusual addition to a parenting training is teaching about the climate ecological crisis. Well, this is why we do it. In 2021, UNICEF Children's Climate Risk Index reported that 1 billion children are in extremely high risk of impacts of climate crisis, threatening their ability to survive, grow and thrive, and deepening existing inequalities. What this diagram by UNICEF pulls together is the way the climate and ecological crisis has both direct and indirect effects, which all profoundly affect both physical and mental health. And the notes, climate does not act on its own. The climate and environmental hazards exacerbate and multiply pre-existing vulnerabilities. For example, you might be a very young mother with 2 infants under 3 living in a flood vulnerable area, dependent on food you grow and the milk you sell. Floods drown some of your cattle, contaminate your water supply, and destroy the bridge that gives you access to the health center. Or you may be displaced and living in a camp where the tent supplied provide no protection from heat waves and the droughts limits the water supply. The end result is a wide variety of health impacts illustrated in the slide. We are going to discuss some of them in more detail. Before I do, I want to share what mothers we have talked to in Kenya and Guatemala told us about the direct impacts of the climate and them and their children. For example, this mother from Kenya told us, when the rains are heavy, we cannot look for work and it is very difficult to feed the children and it brings more disease for children. And in Guatemala, another mother said, it is a lot of sun. There is a lot of sun. Sometimes it is cold. We don't know if it is winter or summer. And it affects the child's health. They get cold or diarrhea. When we were children, the weather was clear. Now it is very hot and the pollution has increased and there is so much rubbish and also fumes. So, how do you cover this topic? First, we include them in the general sessions where relevant. So, for example, in the session on breastfeeding, we discuss some of the negative impacts of the local climate threats. For example, heat waves may mean mothers spend less time breastfeeding because both the mother and the babies feel discomfort. So we discuss what can be done to keep cool and protect themselves. Then, in addition to discussing the health and relationship benefits, we include the environmental benefits, explaining that breast milk is a naturally renewable resource, which requires no packaging or transportation and does not create waste. Our session on recognizing and managing common childhood illness includes discussions about the increased number of respiratory infections and the diarrhea, and how this might relate to increase in climate-related causes such as waterborne and vector-borne diseases. This is because childhood illness from vector-borne and waterborne diseases are increasing. For example, we had to cancel an entire training in southern Guatemala and Chiquimula because all participants' children had dengue, which they had never seen before in that community. Meanwhile, waterborne diseases like cholera had affected families in Masai Mara after the flooding of 2024. Secondly, we have developed a final session entirely dedicated to the climate and ecological health threats and how to address them. This is not about giving a global lecture. The topic needs to be locally relevant and address the key threats facing families in the region. It needs to be simple and practical and conveyed in language that is easy to understand. We don't want to terrify mothers, but empower them by increasing their understanding of health impacts and actions that could be taken by parents and the communities to prevent, protect, adapt, and mitigate. First, we look at each of main health threats in the area. For example, last year in Masai Mara, we started with flooding because there were significant floods in Talek and the surrounding region, which have taken the lives of both people and the cattle, damaged infrastructure, cutting some communities, and limited food supplies and damaged the local economy. We understand there have been more floods in the same area just in the last week. For each threat, we explore in simple terms what are the specific impacts on both maternal and the child physical and mental health, and what mothers need to do, recognize and protect themselves and the children, as well as what to do if directly affected. So, we explored how the flooding contaminated water supplies and could result in outbreaks of waterborne infectious diseases. We described the concrete impacts on health, such as diarrhea, fever, and dehydration, and how this could be recognized and addressed. This connected and reinforced lessons learned in the earlier session in recognizing and managing common childhood illness. We then shared proven methods of prevention and protection from such threats. Here, for example, a UNICEF guidance on flooding freely available on their parenting tips page online. Vector-borne diseases are another threat. They are increasing everywhere. For example, chikungunya is now in Europe for the first time. Dengue transmitting mosquito, Aedes aegypti, have been seen in the Alps of Switzerland. And the West Nile virus disease is appearing in North America. There is no geographical boundary now. This is because warmer temperature, increased rainfall, and higher humidity accelerates vector reproduction, lengthens transmission seasons, and expands the vector's geographical range. Environmental changes as deforestation and irrigation projects can create new habitats for vectors. And poverty may result in a lack of clean water, poor sanitation, and inadequate housing. Now, I will take you back to Lynne. Thank you.
So me again. We just want to discuss two other health threats that are really important.
I think you are mute.
Oh. Can you hear me? Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Sorry. Okay. So I want to discuss heat, which is an increasing danger for everyone's health. We've just had the hottest 11 years ever. And just to highlight some points from this slide, which you can look at on the recording in more detail. Infants, children, pregnant women, the elderly are particularly vulnerable. Too much heat is dangerous for babies and infants because they have a greater surface area to organ size. They have more trouble regulating temperature. They rely on adults to help protect them from heat. Also, dehydration in children can be very dangerous and deadly on occasion. Pregnant women are at greater risk because they can go into early labor, have low birth weight babies, as well as develop gestational diabetes and hypertension. And mothers are more vulnerable to dehydration, stress, and infections, which makes them less able to care for the child. And again, I recommend the UNICEF parenting pages, provides excellent guidance on how to protect yourself. Again, no time to go into that here, but it's very important to distinguish, for example, heat stress from heat stroke, and we recommend looking at them. And then there's air pollution. 99% of the global population breathe air that exceeds WHO air quality guidelines. And this slide shows exposure in childhood can result in a lifetime of dangerous mental and physical impacts. Brains, lungs, liver, cancer, mental disorders. It's really dangerous. And a particular hazard in Central America and East Africa, where almost all the mothers with whom we work cook over open air fires and may sell vegetables beside heavily polluting traffic on big roadways, indoor and outdoor pollution. So we explain both the risks. We discuss protection, such as using different cooking methods, staying away from polluting roads. And again, I recommend the UNICEF parenting tips pages. Finally, and this answers directly a question I was asked. I got some advanced questions from people who signed up from the webinar, and one of them was, how does the climate and ecological framework, climate and ecological crisis, disrupt the nurturing care framework? And I've made an illustration to show how it does that. You saw the nurturing care framework at the beginning of the lecture. Well, here it is at the end with all of the insults to it, because the climate crisis disrupts education, health, food and water supply. And of course, it increases the stress in the parents who have to deal with these things, which can in itself lead to more intrafamily violence, more harsh parenting. And this is why people are beginning to understand that exposure to climate change stresses are actually adverse child events. They're up there with other abusive events. They are a child protection issue, and they can result in toxic stress in the child, which has long-term negative effects on the child's mental and physical health. For example, a much higher risk of depression, difficulties learning in school, suicides increased in adulthood, as well as more non-communicable diseases such as cancer, diabetes, and heart disease. Toxic stress is bad news. The climate crisis is causing it. The climate and ecological crises are major public health threats that we have to address in every way we can. And now I'm handing over to Henry. Thank you, Henry.
Thank you, Lynn. Thank you, Asmamaw, and also thank you, Brandon and team. So I'll go into just briefly discussing what we do as SOS. But just before that, I'll just probably share something about Kenya. Kenya is in East Africa. We are located in East Africa with close to 53 million people. And out of that, you're talking of 42% being children. That is something around 22 million, quite a huge number. Now, commonly experienced climate-related crises in Kenya include some of those that Asmamaw has mentioned: droughts, floods. And with droughts, we're actually talking as recent as 2023, where we had close to 4.5 million people adversely affected by floods, lives disrupted, business destroyed. And also we talk of floods. Now, the floods of 2024 that Asmamaw did mention was quite severe, with close to 300,000 people again affected. And then we also talk of disease outbreaks occasionally, and basically like the waterborne diseases and also vector-borne diseases that Asmamaw did mention. And these contribute to, are normally attributed to contaminated sources of water, damaged sanitation infrastructure, and also increased mosquito breeding sites. Now, out of that, then we start talking of the common disease outbreaks like cholera, malaria, typhoid, fever, dysentery, and rotavirus. Some of them already mentioned by Asmamaw. Now, for SOS Children Villages, SOS Children Villages is the world's largest non-governmental organization focused on supporting children without or at risk of losing parental care. We have presence in 138 countries, with Kenya being one of them. Now, in Kenya, we operate in five counties, or cities if you may wish, with keen interest in strengthening family preservation as a pathway to promoting child protection. So next. Now, so why the interest in collaborating with others to promote pro-family climate actions? As we know, disasters are inevitable, and climate change related crises are increasingly becoming frequent and unpredictable. And this exposes families and communities to a cycle of vulnerabilities, which sometimes are compounded. Now, here we are talking about multiple stressors at play simultaneously. You talk of poverty-stricken community, and at the same time, you have floods that then come and ravage that particular community. And at the same time, they are probably in the middle of an ongoing conflict. And so the situation becomes so distressing for people, families, and children who operate in those particular environments. We talk of fear all over. We talk of anxiety. We talk of anguish, sadness, and cry for help again and again and again. Now, imagine this. If those are the kind of situations that adults face, how about children? Children become the most exposed and vulnerable with heightened child protection risks because naturally children are dependent on adults for basic support, love, care, and attention, which normally during such times is not there. What we normally have is a switch on to survival mode. Everybody for himself and everybody getting into what we call survival mode. So we start having child protection risks like, child illnesses, malnutrition, school dropout cases, early teenage pregnancies. The risk of child labor becomes high, and also issues of trafficking, child trafficking, and sometimes of recruitment into some sort of groups and gangs that are not so good. And for the young girls, we also talk of issues to do with sexual exploitation and abuse. And also then you start seeing a spike in teenage pregnancies. So you can name it from whichever angle. But what you're trying to say here is emergencies in whatever form. And in this case, we're talking of climate-induced emergencies are a threat to child protection and development. It does disrupt family situations and communities' well-being. And because of this, that is why as SOS Kenya, we decided that this is going to also be part of our focus. Next. So briefly on how we are involved as an organization, SOS Children Villages, we have a strategy that emphasizes on the collaboration aspect when it comes to working with communities. And we work with like-minded partners in strengthening capacities of families and communities around preparedness and response during crisis. And this is basically to be able to quickly adjust and cope, and also just give them hope in the small ways that we can as a way of saving lives, saving properties, and also, making sure that families have an opportunity to access the crucial services that are there. So what we do is work around providing access to what we call critical information for the families, some life skills for them, like what was being explained by my two previous speakers, and also letting them know of the available resources in their communities so that they can then engage the duty bearers, have a voice to engage the duty bearers in terms of support and timely response. So this is basically normally to have a way of how the families and communities can be supported to build their resilience and promote their well-being and that of their children. So in this particular case, the collaboration with Lynne and Asmamaw was very, very good for SOS Children Villages, and we started this in 2024. Part of it is normally we work through local organizations. We identify local partners. SOS was a local partner in this case in 2024, and in 2025, MATrust was the local partner. So we work with local partners that are already existing and actually reaching out to what we consider underserved communities. And then what happens is that the local partners at the local organization like SOS and MATrust and the rest help in mobilizing caregivers, mostly mothers and key community actors for an interactive learning approach around preparedness and response. So next. So something briefly about this particular session on emergency preparedness and response, normally focusing on building capacities of the communities we work with. Like what my previous speaker had shared, you make the language simple, simplifying the language, and begins with a brief illustrative PowerPoint presentation to turn the topic into relatable experiences for the participants. We focus on the three most common climate-related crises that we talked about, that is drought, floods, disease outbreaks, and also flood, droughts, and disease outbreaks, explaining their typical effects and the type of response that SOS Kenya does normally undertake or normally consider taking. So once they get to understand this, once they get to see the videos, because we do also use a bit of videos to just show them some of these things so that they can relate with this, then we put them in groups for group activities. And we do this to make the session as interactive, practical, and relevant as possible. Normally, they're in three groups. One group assigned to tackle the case of flood, the case of drought, and then the case of disease outbreaks. So with the three groups formed, we assign ourselves, the three of us, we take up what we call a participant observer role to just let the groups, start organizing themselves into some engaging discussions around the actions that they can think about, that they've been practicing, and that they know about at home in terms of preparedness and in terms of response. So this particular session is normally quite interactive, and they go local. Make it as local as possible. You let them even use their own mother tongue or their own language to try and break it down and bring on board the sort of information that they have. The activity encourages mothers to discuss issues, exchange ideas, experiences, and share local knowledge to both existing and ideal interventions that they would like to apply or continue applying at times of crisis, or even during at times when probably it's just probably the phase of preparedness. So lastly, we normally employ what we call the World Cafe method of learning to just let the group now, rotate amongst themselves and exchange ideas, look at what the other groups have come up with, add on to what probably they think was missed out, seek clarification for areas that are probably not clear. And with this, we have what we call new insights and perspectives that normally now come up, corrections and clarifications that are made, and which we then incorporate into the presentations to just enrich the sort of information that the mothers and the participants in the room that can then now take, beyond what we call the training room and actually use at home when it comes to issues of skills practice within their homes and even in the community. Next. So I'll quickly just want to point out some quotes from the mothers about this particular session on, the crisis session. One of them talked about, I learned about the causes of climate change, because some of them thought that these big discussions were probably meant for some quarters and not for them. And I learned about climate change, especially the need to treat water when contaminated. I did not know that before. Remember, I talked about focusing on underserved communities, probably where services are strained, sometimes where access to information is quite wanting. And so these are some of the feedback that are coming out. They may look so simple and general, but to those participants, it means a lot to them. And about climate change, I loved that. I used to fear it, but now I have ideas about it. These are the sort of feedback that comes out. And something that also came out of the sessions that we had with the different groups, they really called out for more opportunities to be provided for caregivers to go through this kind of training. So it is something that women themselves are really lobbying for, that we should probably do more of this, and also they'll also take it up and do more of that. Next. Yeah, and then the feedback on the training as a whole, and this is now including the sort of sessions that Asmamaw and Lynne also handles. These are some of the feedback that also came out. I learned how to show love and bring children close. I learned it is not good to beat children, and that there were other methods that they could use to maintain love, positive discipline. We got so much to handle about stress, breastfeeding, breast cancer screening. These are sort of feedback that comes from the mother themselves. I learned about reproductive health, diabetes, hypertension, STIs, and how to avoid it and what not to eat. I mean, the information gap is bridged in a way that the caregivers are now able to connect some of the information to their ways of life. I learned things I've never been taught, especially about play, positive discipline, and additionally, that mothers have been empowered as fellow champions. So mothers also saw an opportunity to take the message further, just beyond the training spaces. Next. Yeah. And this is one of the techniques we use to just keep the sessions going and keep the participants engaged in the trainings. There's a lot of music that goes on. There's a lot of singing that goes on during those trainings. And so this is just one of such session. So next. Yeah. So finally, some of the interesting development that have come out of this and the sort of next step that we are also now seeing is that for the period that we've had these trainings, we've noted that there's been increase in knowledge post the training between 20 to 33%, which is quite commendable. Again, some of the dynamics with the group, with the participants that we engage, level of education in some areas is normally sort of low or wanting. And just to get this kind of feedback and finding for us is really encouraging. There is also what we've now seen, positive embrace of health-seeking behavior with the caregivers and their families and the community. And I'll probably mention the issues of vaccinations. We do normally at the end of training then bring in the health workers do medical clinic so that the caregivers can have what we call a referral pathway for the difficult questions and issues that probably they feel will need further support and advice. And we've also seen an increased uptake in our social health medical insurance program, so that now families can access what we call affordable health by the government. And also this thing that we talked about, the mothers resolved not to leave other women behind, saying that they now want to get themselves into groups and find ways on how they can be formally registered so that they can access more resources and do this kind of information dissemination, as well as support each other, become support networks and support groups amongst themselves. Very, very important when it comes to issues of well-being and matter psychosocial support. And lastly, the unleashing of new pool of child protection and climate change ambassadors in the MAHA community. The community health promoters came in as a trainer of trainers, and currently what is happening, they are out there also now training more other participants and caregivers on this particular training. And we believe that the numbers are now growing when we talk of child protection ambassadors and climate change ambassadors out there. So really, really justifying and putting a strong case that more of such trainings is needed. And thank you. Back to you, Lynne.
Thank you, Henry. I hope I'm not muted. I don't know why it's not advancing. So to bring our talk to an end, I just want to share these three important quotes which seem to sum up where we are in the world today. As the UN Secretary General said 2 days ago in response to the latest report from the World Meteorological Office, the state of the global climate is in a state of emergency. Planet Earth is being pushed beyond its limits. Every key climate indicator is flashing red. Well, climate action has never been more urgent, and this is the way we are engaging in it, because UNICEF said in a review that I cited earlier, we need to provide caregivers with the information and skills to protect children from the impacts of climate change. This is the biggest health threat around. And through this small pilot education program, we're trying to do exactly that. Parenting programs can be vehicles for strengthening resilience, knowledge, and community action in places where climate threats are already unfolding. This is not about future generations, which are important, it's about now. Our experiences in Kenya and Guatemala, where we've done these programs, show that mothers welcome this approach rather than resisting it. This is also because we emphasize how important it is that actions and investment should include educating and supporting caregivers themselves on their own vulnerabilities, not just the children, and the ways to protect themselves and their children, because children can't be safe if their caregivers are not. Integrating climate awareness into maternal and infant health can help counter the sense of helplessness that often accompanies climate-related stress, like that mother who said, "Now I know something, I'm less scared." When mothers feel informed and capable, they're better able to protect their children and sustain good caregiving under pressure. And meanwhile, you might think, why that last quote from Arundhati Roy? Empathy may be the single most important quality that must be nurtured to give peace a fighting chance. Well, in a world where we're beset by global conflict and $1 trillion a day is being spent on war and destruction, I agree with her. We need more empathy, not less, as someone said a little while back, and parenting programs that encourage loving, responsive care while giving this education are one of the most powerful ways to foster that. These are the reasons that we all work on this. I want to thank the many individuals and organizations who've accompanied us on this 5-year journey, beginning with an online training in Peru supported by UNHCR, UNICEF helping us with migrant mothers in Bosnia, IMC helping us work in northern Ethiopia during the war, the wonderful MAHA Wheel community in Guatemala, the MAHA Trust in Kenya, Project Hope in Venezuela. I don't want to leave anybody out. Underpinning it all, Rights and Opportunities Foundation giving us funding, and Fordham IIHA giving us funding. You are all wonderful, and we could not have done any of this without you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Lynn, and thank you, Asmamaw, and thank you, Henry, all for just a really brilliant presentation, each of you. It's now 46 minutes past the hour. I promised that I would have you out at the hour. So we'll maybe I'd start with a couple of maybe 2 or 3 questions and then open it up to the floor as well. So if climate change is a global crisis, why do you think the burden of protecting infants is placed mostly on mothers? And maybe a sort of a secondary question to that is, how does the climate crisis undermine the nurturing care for early childhood development? Lynn, Asmamaw, do you want to take that, or do all 3 of you want to?
I mean, I'll answer quickly, and then Asmamaw, the nurturing care framework and the way it's undermined, I dedicated a whole slide to that, so I won't take time, but please take the recording and go back and look at that slide in detail, because it really shows how every bit of that framework is attacked by the impacts of climate change in a primary or secondary way. So I won't go back over that again. But why does it fall on mothers? Why does childcare fall on mothers? That in many of the places we work, and particularly in the last place, where the Masai Mara men told us, childcare is up to the women. I've got other things to do. Welcome to the patriarchal world. I would love it if the burden fell on both men and women, and in some places it does, but primarily childcare in most of the places in the world we work is a mother's task, and therefore protecting the child from the impacts of climate change becomes a mother's task. But it might be that we're really interested to hear from you how we expand that out and be more inclusive of fathers. Asmamaw?
Yeah, this is a very interesting question. You know that
climate change affects, first of all, vulnerable people, just vulnerable countries, vulnerable continents, and vulnerable individuals. Where there is no proper mitigation, adaptation, and resilience, that's where people are affected. Just it needs education, money, and infrastructure. Mm-hmm. People to whom we are working with are living in the poorest countries. Mothers are caregivers, but illiterate. They are living in a poor condition, and there is no good infrastructure to be resilient to resist the existing climate change. So that's why just there is the effect is very, very severe in women, and the children always their well-being relies on mothers. Even mothers are in that condition. For that reason, we focus in mother and the children.
Thanks, Asmamaw. Again, recognizing time. Henry, I have one that's specifically for you. The question is, we have a substantial amount of evidence that highlights the importance of the critical 1001 days. Has your government a plan for early investment?
Yes, in Kenya, we have a comprehensive plan. Started way back with a few years back, we used to have what we call Linda Mama. Linda Mama is a Swahili word, just basically means protect the mother, which was a free Kenyan government maternity program aimed at reducing maternal and infant mortality by providing free prenatal, delivery, and postnatal care to expectant mothers. Now, this was formerly under the NHIA for the National Health Insurance Fund, which has since transitioned to now what we call the Social Health Authority Fund, which I also talked about that we've been going around and just engaging communities so that they can actually register and, get access to affordable healthcare that is there by the government. So yes, we have it in Kenya, and it covers all citizens, including adolescents. Thank you. Back to you.
Thank you, Henry. Are there any other questions from the floor? Anything that you want to put in the Q&A? If not, I'll just make closing remarks and allow you all to go. I wanted some, first of all, I want to thank particularly Lily Egan, our communications officer at the Institute, who did so much to organize this from our side. So, and Lily also put in the chat where you can look for future webinars. Just for everyone to know, April 15th at 12 o'clock New York, we'll be with Father Dan Carew, who is the Regional Director of Jesuit Refugee Service for the Middle East and North Africa. He'll be speaking. And on April 22nd, also at 12 o'clock New York, Saniha Mehmedovich will be speaking on war, trauma, and survival. So that's April 15th and April 22nd are the two next episodes in the webinar series. I really want to thank Henry, Lynne, and Asmamaw for taking the time to prepare and deliver this very, very important presentation. It gets to the very essence of who we are as humans and as men and as women, especially. This presentation will be recorded or has been recorded.